Hi, I'm Dr. Faranak Kamangar, and welcome to the Future of Dermatology Podcast. We're here to talk about the real science behind skin, the medical breakthroughs, the cosmetic innovations, and everything in between.
We are back, and I'm so excited for today's episode. We have Dr. Alison Curfman, who is not only a pediatric emergency medicine doc, which is hard enough on its own, but she has just killed it on the business front and has so much information, and she's given me a lot of helpful business tips and consultations of the past as well. So I'm so excited to have her here. There's so much we can get into, but especially in the field of what else can physicians do with their clinical minds and their clinical space. So Dr. Curfman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and if you want to give a bit of an intro into, because you've done such amazing things in the startup world, if you want to give a quick intro about, well, there's probably not a way to do a quick intro because you do so much, but just give a background of all the things you've done.
Sure. So I'm a practicing pediatric emergency physician, and I feel like all of the work that I've ever done really comes out of that. So the calling that I felt to become a physician, and then the fact that once you start practicing, you start seeing a lot of things wrong with the healthcare system and things that have room for improvement. And many of us have a lot of ideas of like, oh, I'd love to make that better. And some of us do that in the form of, QI or something within an academic environment. I personally got involved in health tech initially because of some really challenging cases that I had that I felt like there could have been a better outcome if we had different tools. And so I remember a case where I was trying to support a rural hospital that had a very sick child, and they had very little information. They didn't have a good history or physical or vitals, but they put him on a helicopter thinking they needed to get him to pediatric care as fast as possible. And he had an unrecognized head injury and herniated on the flight. And I remember thinking that if I could have only been able to see him and support them more by getting more information before he left, that there might have been a different outcome if we had been able to use telehealth, which was really not happening at all back then. And that really put my career on a trajectory to really try and find solutions, because a lot of times the reasons we're not using certain technologies in healthcare has more to do with payment and policy and, what's the evidence base. And so I did a lot of work with telehealth, a lot of policy work with the AAP, and ended up moving into a role to support a lot of virtual programs for a hospital system. And that's when I started getting involved in population health, and in particular, children with medical complexity. So I built several programs, particularly for, really just surrounding these families with support and trying to prove a hypothesis that if we supported these families more, that these children would stay out of the hospital more. And we had great clinical results. We reduced their hospitalizations by 35% with just a virtual intervention. And it was great. We published it, but we didn't have the right financial model. So we weren't really getting paid for the work that we were doing, which is what drives a lot of startups, is to find a new way of doing things. And so that program was a great pilot, but in order to scale, I really needed to move it into more of a value-based model of care. And so that was my first experience as a physician to actually work in and found a startup. So I actually got an opportunity to work for a firm in Nashville that recruited me because they were interested in building solutions for complex kids, and they had found my work. I previously had never, ever considered startups or founding a company to be part of my career journey, but it became an incredible learning experience. We incubated the company for about a year and launched Imagine Pediatrics in 2023. We've since grown, and we are serving tens of thousands of children on Medicaid, all with chronic conditions. We reached a multi-nine-figure valuation in just 2 years, and we just raised $70 million to take this model nationwide. So it was a really incredible startup experience. And I was able to see how my clinical knowledge of these children and their families and what their needs were and where the system was broken was so integral in creating that model of care. And as the company grew into a large operating company, I moved into more of an advisory role. And now I work with venture firms and other companies on really as a clinical advisor. And I'm very much a visionary. I really love the design stage, and I really enjoy being able to use all of my clinical knowledge that I have, gained from years of taking care of patients to really help craft and form new solutions.
Yeah, I love it. I once heard you tell that story, and I was like, oh my gosh, like it blew my mind, because it's taking all the things we have in our heads as a physician and kind of turning it upside down a little bit. Because it's so, I find a lot of physicians when they approach business, you hear things like side gigs and like physician, but where you're sort of like, no, you take the core of what we do, you find how to make it better. And that's what you kind of turn into your idea, because then it's so in line and so mission driven with what we want to do, which is be doctors and improve health. And I think even turning something and hearing words like Medicaid and then venture, like those are not ideas you find together, because even in large centers I've been in, there's groups where they drop Medi-Cal or, because we're in California, or Medicaid elsewhere because it pays little, but to kind of turn that upside down and go, well, this is a population that needs help, and there's ways you can, I just love that story. There's so many pieces to it. Of course, we can look at from so many angles, but I think that is just such a unique story of don't go outside of medicine necessarily, right? Like if you're trying to be an entrepreneur, there are so many pain points within what we do that only we know, because we intimately feel those pain points every day. So
when I talk to venture, I think what they're looking for more than anything are the right problems to solve. Like you can't build a good company that's not solving a good problem. And I've never, ever, ever met a physician that can't think of one really good problem in their field. A lot of people might be like, oh, well, I'm not a founder type. I'm not going to go like quit my job and build a company. And that's fine. Like, I mean, most people don't want to do that. But many of us feel a calling for something more. And especially those of us who have, maybe gone through all this training, and then the whole goal was like become an attending, and then you kind of get settled into that. And then some people feel like, well, what else can I do? What else can I do to challenge myself or to contribute to my field? And sometimes it's hard that traditional medicine, you don't have a lot of chances to be creative in your work because we don't want people to be creative when they're, managing septic shock. You want to follow
algorithms, and there's a lot of protocol.
Yeah, but I think that what surprises a lot of doctors is to find out, and you know this because of where you live in California, but there are companies being built around every single possible concept in healthcare. There are people trying to build companies and solutions who desperately need clinical input, and they want advisors, they want advisory board members, they want fractional leadership. There's a lot of ways to get involved, and I think most of the time the reason doctors wouldn't do that is because either they don't know it exists, right, or they have some sort of preconceived notion about that they don't think they could add value, which we can talk about why that's totally not true, why right, all of us have so much expertise that can add value. Or they feel uncomfortable moving into a space where you're basically like an intern all over again, because you enter the startup space as a doctor who's never done this before. You have to be super confident in the value of your clinical skills, and also very humble about all the things that you don't know about the startup space.
It is a vulnerable place to be, because sometimes I find like within the medical world, there were stages of my life. Now I feel like I'm old in all settings, but there was a stage in my life where I felt young among doctors, but I'd go into a startup world and everybody was like 22. And I was like, what, how have I already aged out? This. So it is. And then skill sets and things like that. So it does put you at kind of a more vulnerable position. And I feel like I've kind of talked to you about when you mentioned telehealth. I mentioned some of the telehealth things I've thought about over time. And it's like, I have to pick your brain on these things. And you gave me such practical advice that, and I know this is a general podcast, we probably can't get too granular, but I'd love to pick your brain for the audience on practical things. So let's say like a physician, like you mentioned, there are those opportunities out there. And you could say there's probably so much to cover there. That needs to be an entire episode. Where do you look? Where do you go? How do you make sure you don't get taken advantage of? Because I've also seen situations where like doctors were training AI and getting like and like $180 an hour or something and no shares. I was like, what? Like, what do you know, there's all these other like practical elements, maybe at the resident level, young attending level, really any stage. And then also part of it is people are in large groups, multi-specialty groups, and there's kind of rules around what you can do and can't do. So I'm sure you've probably learned so much of this along the way. If you have some just top tips that you've learned and you're like, if you could just tell yourself from 10 years ago, if you have any of those like high yield tips.
Yeah. I mean, so first off, you're correct that depending on what sort of like contractual work arrangement you're in, I have definitely talked to physicians that it is in their employment contract that they can't do consulting, outside consulting, or anything they do, it has to go like through their organization to take a cut or something. So that's just good to be aware of. That being said, if that's the situation you're in, I would say that no matter where you are in your training, no matter what sort of contract you're in, there are completely free things that every single person can and should be doing. One is continuing your education. So like whether it's just listening to podcasts like this, or I'll give a plug that I have a podcast called Startup Physicians, where I just interview doctors that work in startups and just share their stories. So keep learning, keep reading blogs or joining groups or communities that you can learn more about these things, because there's really an unbelievable wealth of information online, especially with AI. Like you could go sit and talk to ChatGPT about like, oh, if
True, yeah, do that.
you're a physician startup advisor, how do you recommend getting started? So I mean, there's a lot of ways you can keep learning. But then the other portion is like strategic networking, which I think that anyone can do. Again, whether you're involved in startups or something else you're interested in. I walk people through an exercise to start by brainstorming the sorts of problems in healthcare that you feel like need to be solved, and identifying. I actually usually run like a deep research prompt on a few different AI platforms to be like, okay, come up with companies that are solving these sorts of problems. And then I have them go like stalk them online, like go find their website, try and read about them, go find them on LinkedIn, try and see who works there. What sort of stage are they? Are they early stage? Do they have 2 people at the company? Do they have any doctors? Do they have anyone listed on LinkedIn? And then I have people like cold outreach on LinkedIn, like just to connect, just to say like, hey, I'm a endocrinologist and I learned about your company. I think what you're doing is great. I'd love to connect or something. So I challenge people to try that because it's so easy. It's free.
Yes.
The worst that can happen is people could not respond.
A lot of times people do, right? You as a physician, like people will respond to you. I think that's the best for very people have to get past.
I've made great connection. My connection to be recruited to this firm in Nashville came because somebody at the firm was. It's actually kind of funny. She was trying to download my publication about my program, and she couldn't get the full text article. So she was like, I'll just message her on LinkedIn. And she did. And then that led to like a complete change in my career. But
it's sometimes it's things like that, right? It's so important to share those stories. Those people are like, hey, where did he start? Like, where is the area? And actually LinkedIn is a great resource. I was on this, like, I don't know how I ended up on a social media panel because I'm not really big on social media, but I was like, is anybody on LinkedIn? And like nobody in the room. These were doctors.
Doctors?
I mean, they're not really on LinkedIn. Like that's where business happens. Like if nothing else, take this tip, get on LinkedIn and make your LinkedIn profile just a little snazzier, right? This is tiny, but doesn't need much. But just
you can use AI to do it. And I do have a whole course I do with physicians, and we go through how to position your LinkedIn and how to actually.
Oh, I love it. Okay, well, this was a perfect intro. Do they find that on your site? Is that if it's somebody who wants to reach out to you?
startupphysicians.com. But we do have a course for people that want to learn how to position themselves as advisors. And a lot of it has to do with your narrative. What's your story? Again, what are the problems you want to solve? And getting really clear on that up front then opens the door to do these things like, the continued learning and the networking. I also tell people another great way to get leads is your own professional conferences. Because you think about it, those vendors on the floor, they paid thousands of dollars to get in front of people exactly like you. So instead of going around trying to be like, ooh, where can I get a free notebook? Like a lot of times we walk around the floor like looking for the swag. I have a lot of conversations where I will really deeply ask them about what they're working on and what are their challenges, and I give them some sort of practical tips or something. Like I'll just give them some sort of feedback, and then I'll say like, hey, do you guys have any physician advisors? Are you looking for advisors? Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. If nothing else, I make a lot of connections that way, but it's also a very low risk way to put yourself out there, because that's what you do at conferences.
Yeah, no, these are great practical tips. Okay, first one, we're going to put a link to Alison's website. Like, get that LinkedIn, use AI, use Alison's course, like get that LinkedIn up to date.
Absolutely.
Second, it's a great advice for conferences, actually. I remember like when we were residents, we would go to the dermatology one, and your main goal would be get as many vitamin C serums as you can into your bag. And then you get a little bit older, you get into as an attending, and then you realize there's the snazzy part of the conference where you're kind of walking through all the booths. And then there's like this quiet, sad side, which is like cubicle.
Yes.
As you get older, you end up more in the cubicles, and that's where the business happens, because that's where you're doing these little meetings with the executives of these companies.
Absolutely.
So I'm like, you're looking at the snazzy side, and you're like, okay, no, this is good. Like, you've made it, So those are really great practical tips of just situational awareness at conferences, because everybody who cares about what's in your brain right now is probably there under one roof over like a 3 or 4 day time span. So that's a great practical tip.
And so, I mean, I think the ultimate things that people need to understand, like deeply understand, is that you might not believe it right now, but you should believe me. Your clinical expertise is incredibly valuable, very, very valuable. And anything you do that's new is going to feel new and uncomfortable. And there's going to be things that you're needing to learn. So if you can be really confident in your clinical knowledge, and also very humble and open about all the things that you don't know, and realize that like often in a startup, the doctor is not the one making all the decisions. You're the one providing a lot of the input and the feedback. And we can go deeper later, or if anyone wants to reach out to me about, the whole hang up on like, oh, how do I price myself? How do I not get taken advantage of? I mean, I have a lot of frameworks that I use for physicians on, based on what sort of work they're trying to do, what sort of scopes they're trying to do, whether it's like a one-time hourly thing or a retainer. I generally tell doctors I do not recommend hourly contracts for these sort of advisory roles, because I don't think it aligns incentives very well. But starting with a project, like creating a really clear understanding of something that would be valuable for them, and starting with a project-based fee would be nice, because then you get to know them better. And then I structure all of my relationships as retainer agreements, because I feel like that allows me to have an ongoing impact in an advisory role. But we get into that a lot more in my podcast and other things, but happy to be a resource for people. But I think it starts with a confidence that what you have to offer is really valuable. And Farah, you know this because you spend a lot of time talking to people in the Bay Area. They need doctors. They want doctors. They're looking for doctors.
100%. And I would say, like you mentioned too, like even reach out to like us. Like we might have someone that we've just met at a conference who said a certain thing, which might not be what I do, but maybe you say, because that's happened a couple of times where residents have said something to me, and I'm like, wait a minute, this person was telling me that exact project. And so just even in the community, just reaching out to other docs, because they've probably also done a bit of expansion of the networking.
That was another thing. If you find companies that you're interested online, and you look on LinkedIn and they seem like they have a doctor there, I say like, reach out to the doctor, ask them how they got involved, just be connected with them. You're all welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. My vision, I know that by building this company that's now serving almost 100,000 children, I was able to have what I consider this one-to-many impact. So I'm able to impact so many more children with the business model that I created than the kids I see individually in the ER. And so my vision is to help create pathways for physicians to have other physicians get that one-to-many impact as well.
No, I love it. And I really feel like these are the incremental things needed to move healthcare along and improve things. They're the larger policy things that everybody goes after, but I can only imagine a world where doctors are shaping the next like projects and companies that can only improve healthcare, because we're going to come at it from an ethical standpoint and make sure high value is being delivered. Of course, there is some level of money that needs to be made for things to be sustainable, but that's not the primary goal of why the company is being created. So I love your mission. Like it's going to be just improving people's lives too, patients, doctors, but just expanding so many great ideas, because there are these little steps that we all get hung up on. Like, how do you go from this step to the next? And if you have resources like you, if you're able to just help you along with that, that's huge. And also, so this is the Future of Dermatology podcast. So we always ask what you're excited about for the future of dermatology. But for you, what are you excited about just in the future of medicine at all, or dermatology, if you know any great dermatology companies that our viewers should be starting?
Well, I have so much respect for dermatologists. Some of the smartest people I have ever met are dermatologists, and I definitely appreciate you all. I would say it's more the future of medicine, that it's going to be a rate of change that it's going to be profoundly uncomfortable, the amount of change that's coming in healthcare. And I think a lot of us get a little deer in headlights, like, oh my gosh, AI and all of these other things. Like, I'm a little excited about some of this, and I'm really scared about some of this, and I don't know what to do about some of this. And I would say join other physicians like us that are have a lot of the same feelings. We're actually trying to do something about it, and would rather be involved in a driver's seat than just watching changes happen to us in medicine. So I think the future of medicine is going to be a lot of change, but that's life. So let's help lead it.
I love that. You're right. I mean, this is a time like no other, basically, what's happening right now. And it's going to happen whether we take part or not. So just enabling physicians to be at the helm, because I think the EHR change was so minor compared to what's happening with AI. But we saw with the EHR change, when doctors weren't involved, that didn't end up doing anything good for us, right? The doctors ended up being burnt out, spending a large majority of their time dealing with systems that weren't made for them. So I can only imagine, if we're not involved, how much worse it could get down the line, versus if we are involved, it can get so much better. So I love that you pointed that out too. It's just, I mean, it's kind of a time where we can't just put our heads down and just go to clinic and kind of ignore what's going on around us. Because in 5 years, 10 years, that clinical space you're in is going to look very different. So you want to shape it rather than just
be the change you wish to see in the world.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Alison. You are always so amazing to talk to. I get so inspired. I feel like I'm going to get off this episode and be like, okay, I have to go do 5 more projects or start something new. And
thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's good. And we'll put all the resources in the show notes below too, so everyone knows how to reach out to Alison too, for you have so many great courses and resources. So thanks again.
Thanks for joining us today on the Future of Dermatology podcast. If you enjoyed learning about the science behind skin, make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time. As a reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only, not for medical advice. Always consult your healthcare provider.